Buongiorno team, you catch me on an evening session. Have a little look where we're at. If anybody that watched the last video that I did, I was on this lake and I was on that peg there and I managed to win the match with £13. Well, you might notice I've got the old slacks and shirt still on. I've come straight from work, couple of hours as the nights are drawing in towards the end of August, and I want to try and do something that I've not covered before on the videos, just some simple bomb and pellet fishing. And I want to fish that peg behind me there, completely opposite to the way that I fished the match. No small fish, big baits, nice and selective, just to see how it goes. And I think of an evening I should get 1 or 2 pulls. More importantly as well, no time for tea, so cheeky little chippy number, check that out. Cod bites, chips, curry sauce, and of course a nice buttered roll. Lovely stuff. So I'm going to nail that and then I'm going to get set up over there and have a little dabble. And in a flash we are set up. So what, 45 minutes after finishing work, I've had my chippy tea and I'm set up on the same peg it was at last time we did a video, peg 8 on my syndicate lake. Last time we concentrated down the margins and top 2+2 and we had that net of silverfish. Today completely different. The beauty of this method is it takes literally 5 minutes to get going. So we're going to concentrate on the edge of the island then, about 18 inches of water, and also just off of this main pads here, 3/4 of the way across. You can see the water's dropped, the line on the peg across dropped about 8 inches by the look of it. And the bait tray is as simple as it comes as well. We have got some 2mm micros. They are dusted in Miracle Baits green pellet crumb. That just gives it that stickiness to go around the method feed, and I'll tell you about that in a minute. Some 6mm pellets, some 8mm pellets, and some various wafters for the hook. Because although we're going to be fishing bomb and pellet, and there's the method, I'm actually going to start on a method feeder. So what I do is I kick off with what is that? That's a Drennan 20 gram feeder, 4-inch hook length with a size 14 hook, 5-pound hook length, 6-pound mainline Daiwa sensor, just a little rod, little 9-foot Daiwa Matchman, cheap as chips. And rather than last time fishing for anything, very selective with these big baits. So I'm going to feed 6mm pellets with an 8 or a wafter on top and just see what comes along. So let's get cracking. Okay, as mentioned, what I'm going to do, simply feed some 6mm pellets first of all against the island over there, just off of it, off of the shelf, and then in that sort of general area just off of them lily pads. And as I say, a really simple setup that I've got here. These little Drennan feeders are great because they're sort of hybrid. I don't need a mould or anything. A little orange wafter we'll kick off with. It's got a little 3000 size reel, and all I do is I just sort of fill the method mould. I've got a little camera set up here for you, make a change. Pop my my bait in, and then put some more micros on the top, and then really pack it in, and you get that nice smell of that pellet crumb and micros. It's a 1 ounce tip, so it's only a little 9-foot rod, and we could actually underarm it here. In fact, I think we will. What I'll do, not enough people learn to do this technique, but use the weight of the feeder against the spring of the tip and just underarm and just drop in like that. I'm not going to clip up or anything. Sink the line, and then I'm just going to hide my little rod down there, and we're fishing. So we're sort of, my tip is almost facing where I'm fishing, and I'm not worried about that as long as we've got that clutch set nicely. So why am I feeding 6mm pellets as opposed to perhaps the 8s if we're going for big fish? Well, the reason why I've started on the method and I'm feeding the slightly smaller pellets is I actually want to attract those small fish that we were catching last time. So all those little rudd and roach and bits and pieces and small carp, I want them rooting around and gaining attraction for the bigger fish. They'll soon mop up these small micros that we're putting through that method feeder. So we've got a little spot to home in on, i.e. the feeder, with a bright little orange pellet on top of it, a little wafter, and just spread around that general area is where I'm just pinging 2 or 3 pellets every now and then to make a little bit of noise. So first of all, the method is for the fish to just home in on something. Those little ones I'm sure will no doubt come in and start pecking away and eating those micros, flashing away on the bottom of the lake, and hopefully catching the eye of those bigger carp that I assure you, although there's not tons and tons of them, I assure you they live in here. They go up to sort of 14, 15 pound. So that's the general gist, that's the plan for now. Once I start getting all these little indications and I know that the small fish have turned up, that's when then I'll probably go to the inline bomb. Really simple, I'll show you on this camera. It's a little, what is it, 10 gram bomb that line runs through the middle, and attached to the end I'm just going to have a small snap link swivel, getting little indications now, to put my hook length on. So it's almost, it's not even, it's semi-fixed, but that comes out very, very easily. So we'll show you that later on. I just want to attract these small fish first of all. That's what I want, my tip bouncing around, rattling about, so then I know that those roach and rudd and little carp and skimmers are mopping up those 2 mils and hopefully attracting those bigger fish. Not to say I won't catch a carp on using a method, of course. It's probably the most used tactic on this little lake for pleasure anglers, certainly because it's so simple. Okay, I've had 2 5-minute casts over by them pads and I'm getting lots of little rattles and knocks, which is great. That means that the small fish are probably rocked up. So I'm just going to repeat the process now, but on the corner of the island. And what I'm going to do here, I've just changed the hook bait to a yellow wafter because I know how much fish like sweet corn on here. I'm just going to move that little rod rest. And there we go, we're fishing against the island now. So 2 feederfuls of method micros, if you like, against the pads. And I'm just going to do the same over there. Let's get these small fish in, rooting around, hopefully attracting the bigger fish. Again, once I start seeing those little rattles and taps on the tip, I know that those smaller fish have turned up. They'll be pecking away on those micros, which is great. Hopefully then in turn attracting the bigger fish. I think where I've chosen, point of the island, by the pads, natural fish holding areas anyway. So I'd expect the better fish to be patrolling around the island, certainly this time of an evening. What time is it? It's now 10 to 6. Fishing sort of 15 minutes now. And certainly they'll be fishing the pads over there as well for protection. Once I know these small fish have turned up, then I'll change to the bomb. Yeah, it's rattling away now, which is great. It's exactly what we want. So I'll put another feeder full in after this if I don't get a fish. And then I've got a bit of particles, smaller particles out there that the little ones can eat. I want them rooting up the bottom, getting a bit of competition. And then when I switch to the pellet, there's lots and lots of little twitches there now. And when I switch to the pellet, hopefully that'll be the bigger fish that are singling out those bigger baits. Okay, so I've swapped over now. I'll show you on the little camera here. I've got this running inline 10 gram Guru cube feeder with a little snap link swivel that just hides itself inside there. So it's sort of semi-fixed, but it's just nice. Same hook length, 4-inch with a little band, and I've now put an 8mm pellet on. So what that means is I can I can now fish in amongst those loose offerings that I've pinged out there and cast anywhere I like. That's really close, that's great. Sink the line, just pop it on this little rod rest here. And we're fishing, nice and simple. Now, because I've had plenty of those little knocks, like I said, I think there's small fish there now. So we're being a bit more selective. There's a few particles out, and it's important to keep pinging in a couple of 6s and a couple of 8s, but not loads and loads, because if I'm not catching, said many times before about this venue, it's not a commercial, so they're not going to be competing as such to grab at these pellets. You know, it's not like I'm going to fish a pellet waggler and the rod's going to be ripped off the rest. It's not like that on here. So I don't want loads and loads of bait on the deck that's uneaten, which makes mine harder to find. But you've got to continue making a bit of noise. So just a couple of pellets every couple of minutes, just to make that rattling sound. Now, general rule of thumb with bomb fishing, the deeper the water is, the longer your hook length can be. So a lot of people will fish sort of 12, 18, 24-inch hook lengths. You know, if there was any sort of depth. But on here, where we're probably down to about 8 foot now with this water level, this 4-inch hook length is perfect. And I often fish a 4-inch hook length, even in deep water as well. It's nice and direct, really positive bites. You know, I'm not looking to catch on the drop here, so I don't need a slow fall. I just want it to be direct towards that lead. And again, 10 gram isn't necessarily heavy enough for the fish to hook itself against the weight of the feeder. So I need that bit of directness, tight line, that actually it's going to be the rod that it's probably going to hook itself against. So there's an 8mm pellet on now, tight against those pads, probably a bit too tight actually. We'll have fun and games if it roars off. But that's the general theory behind the fishing. Start with a method, get some particles out there, get the small fish competing, pinging bigger baits over the top, looking to be a little bit more selective now. I can go onto a 6mm, see what those small fish are. Perhaps I'll pick up a roach or a small carp, just see what's making all those knocks on the tip. Play it by ear. Right, after that first chuck on the bomb, and I mentioned about, you know, I don't want a load of bait building up along the bottom. I've had quite a few knocks there off small fish. There's a bit of rubbish wrapped around my hook bait, which doesn't help. This is where your flavourings can come in. If you want something to stand out in amongst what looks to be very, very similar on the bottom, so we've got a whole bunch of 6 and 8mm pellets out there, it's where your liquids come in. I had a root in my bag, I've only brought a few bits with me, and I've got this krill and squid flavoured liquid. Just poured a little bit in the cap, and now I can just dunk my my hook bait in there, give it a little soak, and that just offers something a little bit different now against all the baits that are on the bottom. So we'll see if that makes a difference. And again, I was getting lots and lots of little indications that probably small fish are picking up the bait. But if there are one or two better fish out there, then just by having a little bit of flavour to the hook bait, it might just make it stand out from what I'm feeding. That was terrible feeding, but doesn't matter. Well, it's took a little while, but let's see if that'll record. I finally had a bite off of the island. It was on a 6mm pellet with this little bit of glug on. But it's been worth the wait by the look of it. Looks like a nice common. And actually it was pretty instant as well. It had not been in the water for more than a minute. They do fight hard, the carp in here. And he's giving a good account of himself. And these little rods are perfect for this sort of fishing. It's just about ready. There we go. Now, for those that watched the last video, you might think to yourselves, well, you know, why didn't you do that on the match? And I did say, you pays your money. Let's give you a little look at him. And sort of makes your choice. But I can't sit there and wait for odd bites. Now, it is the evening, of course, so much better chance of getting these better stamped fish. He's not a monster. You can see him on that camera. But he's a bonny fish. I can pop him in the net because he's under 4 pound. Okay, after the excitement of that first carp, I'm going to do a slight change here. I'm going to reverse engineer what we've been doing. So let me just cast this out. I've had a couple more chucks against the island and no joy, so I'm going to go towards the pads now. And what I mean by reverse engineering is I'm going to really up the feed for the next 10 minutes or so. Let's get that settled. I'm going to really up the feed now with the pellets. I've got, you know, probably gone through half a pint in about, what have we been fishing? An hour. So I'm going to really sort of up the ante. Lots of regular feeding over the top, plip, plip, plop, until I probably run out of these, to be fair. Which means there will be a fair amount of bait on the bottom. So there's not so many little taps anymore like there was when I was fishing the method, because all the micros would have been et. And now we're concentrating just on these hard pellets, which is what it's all about, really. But I want to get plenty in. And reverse engineering, I'm going to go back on the method. So essentially what we've done is we would have put loads of bait in. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of pellets on the bottom. And then we need a standout bait in amongst them. Now we've done the glugging trick, and that seemed to work. We had one doing that. Something to stand out amongst the bait on the bottom. But by having the method back on, it's going to be that little tight, compact mound of bait in amongst all those 6 and 8 milli pellets on the bottom. So something for the fish to zone in on. If I was catching regular, which was never going to happen on here, we've explained this before, it's very tricky water, it's not a commercial, typical club lake. If we were catching, say 3 or 4 fish in that first hour, I'd have just continued on the bomb, fine. But I know, because of the lack of positive bites I've been getting, that bait's going to be building up on the bottom, and it's going to be harder and harder for the fish to find my individual pellet, because there's not enough of them competing. So we're going to reverse it round, put the method back on, once I've gone through all these, and then that'll present something for them to home in on, in amongst the pile of bait on the deck. So I'm going to go through this bait, probably over the next 10-15 minutes or so, and then we'll spend the last sort of half an hour or so on the method with a wafter on, or a hard pellet. Right, back on the method. I'm going to have an 8mm pellet on the hook, because there's plenty of them out there. That's what I say about flipping things around a little bit. I know there's going to be a lot of bait out there. I've gone through all my 6mm, and although it's only sort of 3/4 of a pint, it's not a lot, but it is when there's no fish competing. So now, the aim, I'm going to go towards the island with this. The aim is that we're offering a little parcel of bait in amongst all those loose offerings that will be scattered around. There's just a little bit more, something for them to zone in on. So let's see if it works. You know, just going to have half an hour more. And we've still got some 8mm left, so we could ping the odd one over the top. Try and draw them in, but I'm thinking it's a little bit of F1 Supreme, micros, bit of scent in the water. I think it should work a treat. Another little trick just to get the fish homing in. My micros were drying out a little bit, so whilst we've got the old additive out, I use that to give them a bit of moisture, and they'll soak that smelly squid and krill or whatever it is up. And again, that will just add a little bit more attraction in amongst all those loose offerings that I've been pinging out for the last hour or so. So they're nice and moist now. I'll have a good, yeah, they stink. So, again, just another little trick to get the fish to home in a little bit. I just had a monster line bite, now swapped to this method, just towards the island, as I think a fish swum into the line behind the feeder. So I'm just going to chuck it there again and see. It does feel now that more chance of catching fish off the island than those pads. Another reason why the method's a bit better out there is a lot of rubbish on the bottom out there. Every time I chucked out on the bomb, I come back with some muck on the hook or wrapped around the bomb. So it's certainly better for having a hidden hook bait over there, but I just feel that now, the witching hour, those better fish are definitely popping themselves along the island, probably picking those loose offerings up that I've been feeding out there. I'm just hoping that feeder now will allow them to zone in. I have all this flavour leaking off these micros. And I've got a pink wafter on at the minute, so a nice bright standout hook bait as well, which is a little bit different from all those pellets that are on the deck. There we go. Just had a feeling after having that, oh, it's a better fish. After having that liner, there was something a little bit better out there. And I needed to have that standout bait. This has gone right down the channel. I need to be a little bit careful here because there's a lot of weeds and stuff on the inside. I think this is better than the last one. Right, maybe about the same size. No, a little bit bigger, perhaps. Yeah, he's a scrappy beggar. Yeah, he's bigger. I think that hook's just come out. I was lucky there. Yeah. Now, I'm not going to try and lift him up because he's got a bit of energy left in him. Hopefully you can see him there on the action camera. Probably 3.5 pound, 4 pound maybe. I just had that feeling that I had a really strong line bite and thought, now they seem to be on that island now. And I'm glad I put that bright wafter on, something a bit different. So I think those pellets have drawn them in. And now it's a case of, as I say, reversing it round and having a standout bait on top. Well, I've moved the camera now because I mean, what are we? An hour and a half in. 2 carp, so it's hardly fast and furious, which I never expected it to be, and that's okay. But I think now the corner of the island is the place to be. I knew, you know, fish, they're going to be going, it's like a natural patrol route around that island, as I've said. And at some point they were going to land upon all those loose offerings, those freebies that I've been feeding pretty regular. I still ping a few out now. And by having that more standout bait now, that little parcel on the method, the bright wafter, in amongst all those freebies, it just gives them something to zone in on. When they're going round, there's a little liner there. Oof. And there we go. Is that on? Yes. That only feels like a small fish. Yeah, it's tiny. But it just goes to show a little method in amongst all those. Oh, it's a tench. Love it. First tench I've ever caught on this lake, I think. Oh, that's a bonus. Hooks come out as well. You can see, beautiful little tench there. My favourite fish. Stunning. So, I'd say that might have been what's a few tench fizzing about over there. Right, well the light's dropping now, as it does this time of the year, pretty quickly. So we'll probably start wrapping up in a minute or two. I just had a really aggressive line bite. I'm very tight to the island. Might have knocked it down the shelf, so I'm not sure whether I'll get another bite. But anyway, these tactics, if we was on a commercial, they can be deadly, I promise you. If you kick off on a method, getting some particles in there, micros, ground bait, whatever, and try and keep to the same spot, the same area, be accurate and get some bait in the area. Look for those indications, small fish, and in turn those small fish will attract the bigger ones. On a commercial it would be in minutes. On here it can take a while because you're not getting carp competing. Then I swap over to the bomb. You're feeding regular 6 or 8 mils, depending on what stamp of fish you're sort of targeting. and change to the bomb, and you get a run of fish, just stick at it. But if you keep feeding and you're not getting bites, then that bait is building up on the bottom, especially if the little fish aren't big enough to eat it. So what do you do when you've got a whole bunch of bait on the deck? How's yours going to stand out? Well, that's where you can reverse things around and go back on the method and deliver that very specific little parcel for the fish to zone in on. It's all wrapped up in a nice little present with your hook bait in the middle. Whilst they're picking off those loose offerings, they can very well find yours as a standout bait. So that's sort of the principle behind it. And again, it's not a great venue to demonstrate it, but you know, we've had one on the bomb, we've had one on the method and that little tench, and there's certainly fish milling around over there now. I'm getting a lot of liners. It could be those small fish again, but I think he'll give it 5 more minutes and then we'll call it a draw. Well, I couldn't resist one last cast on I put a white wafter on as the light was fading. I thought a nice bright bait, and well, it's gone right round. So I think we'll call this a draw if we get him in. I've had a million last casts before. I'll be here till it's pitch black if I keep going. But 2.5 hours, 3 carp and a tench. Compare that to what I had on the match. It was all little silvers. And this time of night is certainly the time for carp. I don't know if he's bigger than the others. He's certainly pulling well. Where are you going? He really is pulling well. I've got to watch out for all these weeds. I mean, he knows where he's going. Oh, he's definitely a better fish. Oh yeah, he's fighting like a demon. Good fun on these little rods. Just need to keep him out of all these weeds. He's not actually that big. He's just fighting like a warrior. Come on. He's not giving up. And he's finding all this weed down here. There There we go, we got him. Now that's a lovely fish. Yeah, he's bigger than the others. Oh, let's put the rod down there. Oh yeah, he's much bigger than the others. Oh, he's beautiful. Like a lot of the fish in this lake, it looks like he's never been caught. Let's see if we can hold him up. Now that is an absolute clunker. And what a way to end the session. Hopefully you've learnt a few things on the old bomber method. Cheers for watching.